There's a version of you that no one gets to see, not because you're hiding it, but because you've stopped knowing how to show it. You smile, you function, you answer when people ask how you're doing, and somewhere underneath all of that, you feel nothing, or worse, you feel everything at once, and you can't explain either one. If that sentence didn't land like a quiet punch to the chest, this video probably isn't for you. But if it did, if something in you just went still, keep watching, because what you're carrying has a name, and you've been carrying it longer than anyone knows. Let's start with something you've never said out loud. At some point, you stopped asking for help, not because you didn't need it, but because the 1 or 2 times you reached out, it didn't go the way you hoped. Maybe someone minimized it. Maybe they tried to fix you in 20 words. Maybe they just looked uncomfortable, and something in you made a decision, quietly, without ceremony. I'll handle it myself. And you did. You got very good at handling it yourself. So good, in fact, that people around you started to believe you were okay. And the strange part is, you let them believe it. Because explaining the truth would take more energy than you have. Because by the time you found the words, the moment would already be gone. Because part of you doesn't even know how to explain something that's been building for years. What no one tells you is that this kind of armor, the one you built to survive, eventually starts to feel like your personality. You become the strong one, the one who doesn't complain, the one who always figures it out, and everyone is grateful for that version of you. But you start to notice, no one ever checks on the strong one. No one ever asks what it cost you to be that person, and after long enough you stop expecting them to. That's not bitterness, that's adaptation. That's what it looks like when a person has learned deeply, privately, painfully, that they are fundamentally on their own. Here's something that might unsettle you a little. You've forgotten what it feels like to feel safe. Not unsafe exactly, just not safe. There's a version of okay you've been living in for so long that you've started calling it normal. You don't sleep well, but you sleep. You're not happy, but you're functional. You don't cry as much as you used to, and you've decided that means you're healing. But it doesn't mean you're healing. What no one tells you is that emotional numbness isn't the absence of pain. It's the result of too much of it. Your nervous system, over time, does something extraordinary. It learns to flatten things, to protect you from the full weight of what you've experienced. It starts muting the signal. And the cruelest part, it mutes everything. Not just the bad, the good too. You start to notice it in small moments. Something that should feel exciting doesn't quite land. Something beautiful happens, and you watch yourself from a slight distance, thinking, I should feel more than this, but you don't. And you move on, because you've gotten very good at moving on. There's a term in psychology, emotional blunting. It's what happens after the nervous system has been overwhelmed enough times that it starts operating in a kind of permanent low voltage mode. Not broken, just dimmed. And from the outside, you might look perfectly fine. But inside, you're watching your own life through glass. Present, but not quite there. And yet, despite all that numbness, your mind never stops. That's the contradiction no one around you sees. On the outside, calm, composed, quiet. On the inside, a conversation that never ends. You replay things from last week, things from 3 years ago, things from a version of your life that doesn't exist anymore. You go over them looking for the moment you could have done something different. The thing you said, the thing you didn't say, the warning sign you should have seen coming. This isn't overthinking, not in the way people dismiss it. This is a mind that learned very early that it needed to stay alert, that the cost of not paying attention was too high, and so it never fully rests. Even when you sleep, something is still running. You wake up tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, and you start to wonder if this is just who you are. But it isn't who you are, it's what happened to you. There's a difference. Hypervigilance, the psychological term for what you're experiencing, is not a character flaw. It's a survival response. Your brain, having been through enough, decided it was better to be always ready than to be caught off guard again. The strange part is, it worked. You learned to read rooms, to sense when something was wrong before anyone said a word, to prepare for the worst so the worst couldn't destroy you. You became perceptive in a way that most people aren't. But perception at that level is exhausting because you can't turn it off. Even in situations that are actually safe, something in you keeps scanning, keeps waiting, keeps bracing. You don't fully trust good things, not because you're negative, but because you've learned more than once that good things can disappear. You can be in a room full of people who love you and feel completely alone. Not lonely in the way that's easy to explain, lonely in the way that lives underneath everything, in the space between what someone says to you and what you wish they understood. In the silence after someone asks a casual question about your life, and you give a casual answer because the real one would change the entire room. People who've been through too much develop a kind of private language, a way of holding the heaviest things completely out of sight. And after enough years, the hiding becomes seamless. So seamless that even people who are close to you, people who genuinely care, are only ever holding a version of you. The safe version, the one that doesn't require too much of them. And at some point, you stop grieving the gap. You just live in it. What no one tells you is that this kind of loneliness is one of the quietest forms of suffering that exists. Because from the outside, you look connected, you have relationships, you show up, you contribute, but inside, you carry this low-level awareness that you are not fully known. And more than that, a part of you has stopped believing that you could be. Not out of hopelessness, out of evidence. You've tried, in different ways, with different people, in different chapters of your life. And somehow, the full weight of who you are has always been a little too much, or a little too strange, or a little too hard to hold. And so you carry it yourself, the way you've always carried things, quietly, completely, alone. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. Everything you've just heard, the armor, the numbness, the hypervigilance, the loneliness, none of it makes you broken. It makes you someone who survived something. And survival, at a certain cost, reshapes a person. Not always in the way that looks good on the surface, but in ways that run very deep. People who have been through too much tend to have a kind of internal gravity, a weight to them, not heaviness, gravity. Something that makes other people feel seen even when you're not trying. Because you know what it is to be in pain and have no one notice, so you notice. You notice when someone is quieter than usual. You notice when the smile doesn't reach the eyes. You notice what people don't say, and that's not nothing. That's extraordinary. The strange part is, and you may resist this, everything you've been through has made you one of the most perceptive, most quietly compassionate people in any room you enter. Not because suffering is a gift, it isn't. But because it forced you to understand things about being human that most people don't have access to. You've lived in places inside yourself that others have never visited, and you came back. You're still here. I'm not going to tell you that everything is going to be okay. You've heard that before, and you know that things are sometimes okay, and sometimes they aren't, and that's just the actual shape of a life. What I will say is this. The version of you that made it through everything you've been through, that version deserved more softness than it got, more patience, more people who stayed, And it's worth acknowledging that, not to stay in it, but because the things we never acknowledge have a way of running quietly in the background for the rest of our lives. You don't have to be fixed. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone who hasn't earned the explanation. You just have to stop treating your survival like something to be ashamed of. And at some point, maybe you start to let one person in. Not all the way, not immediately, but a little further than before. Because the loneliness you've been carrying, that vast, practiced, invisible loneliness, it doesn't have to be permanent. It just has to become something you're willing to loosen your grip on, slowly, carefully, on your own terms. You've earned that.